Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session on the future of food. My name is Pano Anthos. I started XRC Labs in 2015 as a venture fund and accelerator to foster innovation in the retail, technology, and consumer goods sectors that we believed were approaching an impending cataclysm. And here we are. COVID has no doubt been a shock and has perhaps changed consumer behavior permanently. We invest in the earliest, very earliest stages of startups to promote change and enable the transition and transformation of the consumer goods and retail sectors. We've been building a large ecosystem of mutually beneficial players, including leading brands such as Estee Lauder, TJX, and CVS, with over 300 venture capitalists, investors, and over 500 industry executives and mentors. So whether you're an entrepreneur or a corporate executive, we would welcome you into a network that is much bigger than XRC. Please feel free to reach out to me at pano@xrclabs.com so that we could help in any way. We're excited to host today's panel as we see the revolution that took place in the fashion and apparel space coming to food. As the disruptors like Warby Parker, Allbirds, and Vuori have challenged the status quo in fashion and retail, we see the same disruption coming to food. Whether it's the primary focus around D2C or the velocity with which new products are designed and introduced to the market, the change is coming. And if the impact that the disruptors have had on the fashion industry is any indication, we're all in for a world of change. With that, I'd like to introduce our partner on this session from RBC Capital Markets, top analyst in consumer goods, Nick Modi. Nick will help set the backdrop for today's topic, introduce our guest panelists, and lead the discussion. Nick, take it away.
Thank you, Pano. Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be part of this panel today. Before we get going, let me set the stage here and get us out of today and into tomorrow and really set the stage for my discussion with Christopher Jane of Proper Good. So I'm wondering if many of you know who this fine, handsome gentleman is. This is Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Karr. He was a French writer that basically came up with a quote: "The more things change, the more they remain the same." And it's interesting to go back in history and think about some of these dynamics about how things have changed, but they remain the same. So this is Jacob's Pharmacy, where Coca-Cola was first served at the counter, as part of the soda fountain. And fast forward many, many decades later, again, the more things change, the more they remain the same. A similar type of experiential concept, taking what would deem to be a very cheap product and premiumizing it, like we saw with Starbucks. And kind of evolving even further, the integration of technology into that experience, which is where you find the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, which has not only provided a very good user experience, but also data for Coca-Cola, the company, to actually come up with its innovation pipeline based on the most popular formulations chosen. The milkman, we said the milkman was dead. Again, the more things change, the more they remain the same. But what about other routes to market, like the Amazon floating warehouse that actually was filed as a patent by Amazon several years ago that would effectively allow autonomous drone delivery out of the warehouse to large outdoor events in large rural areas? Or Robomart that you can hail using an app like an Uber, so you can pick your vegetables and fruits fresh, right out of the car, rather than having someone do it for you. Even Samsung has got into the game and disrupting the way we shop. They filed a patent for a AR/VR contact lens that would allow you to effectively image any retail store or aisle on any surface at any time. And over time, AI would actually make that view much more customized to your personal preferences. Now, the evolution of data will also be paramount to the future of consumer products. Right, we think about the data that we would all use, provide to kind of get a better user interface or experience, right? Our name, our gender, that's kind of how it used to be decades ago. And then we added on online activity and transaction behavior, and even social security numbers that were linked to other data sets, such as credit scores, et cetera, when applying for a loan. But now we have so much information about us. And if we choose to share that with others, which the younger consumer is very happy to do, we can actually have a much better user experience amongst a lot of different services and products that we might be interested in the future, right? I mean, think about the oximeter, how it went from the hospital and now onto our wrists as a diagnostic, right? So we're just getting much more information about ourselves. Or the tooth sensor that was, it's currently being worked on at Tufts University, which effectively can tell you what's going on in your mouth and all that data in your mouth with the bacteria to tell you what your blood glucose levels are, what your blood alcohol content is, if you're going to get sick in 2 weeks based on the bacteria that you have in your mouth. So there's a lot of data that we as consumers are collecting that's effectively going to alter the way we make decisions in the future. But it goes farther than that, because now if we're willing to share that information to companies, they can provide us much more customized experience on the products and services that they deliver to us. Biome, which basically allows you to take an at-home test to understand what's in your gut biome so you can customize your diet based on your DNA. Nutrasense, which is basically a continuous glucose monitor, can effectively tell you what your glucose levels are in real time. Now, this is obviously important for diabetics, but it's also very important for people trying to lose weight. It can effectively tell you every exercise you're doing and the impact it's having on your glucose levels, and the foods that you're eating and the impact that it's having, so you can understand exactly what you should be doing in order to keep your glucose levels down so you can actually lose weight. And Sushi Singularity, which was actually launched in Tokyo in 2020 during the pandemic. Okay, this is basically a restaurant concept where you have to provide biosamples 2 weeks ahead of time. Then they will customize a meal based on your gut biome, personalized to you. And the chef is effectively a 3D printer. Check it out on YouTube. It's actually a real concept. This is not science fiction. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen and I can kick it over to Christopher Jane, who's a co-founder and CEO of Proper Good. Chris is a second-time founder in the natural food space and a Stanford MBA grad. We wanted to speak to Chris because he really has a different perspective on where the industry is heading as it relates to the future of food. Chris, before we dive into things and we get into our Q&A, please just give us some context and introduce Proper Good and share what you're doing there and how it's different.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. That's perfect. Yeah, I'll give you the quick context. As you said, I've been a founder of, or involved in the founding team of a couple of food brands here in the United States now over the last 10 years. One primarily focused on retail and grocery distribution, and now with Proper Good, more focused on direct to consumer. So really seen and played the game in all the different channels of US grocery and food and beverage and where that's going. But to give you the context on Proper Good, hopefully you can see my screen. So Proper Good, we make 90-second restaurant quality meals. It's as simple as that. The most convenient meals ever made is the aim, with a real focus on clean ingredients, functional ingredients, and super convenience. So for anyone not familiar, this is the launch lineup that we launched just about 11 months ago. So as you can see, ultra vibrant, transparent packaging. And if you flip it over, you'll see the ingredients panel reads as if you made it at home. It's truly as high a quality as physically possible in that convenient pack format. There are a number of things that make the brand different, and we'll get into that obviously through this discussion. But just quickly, one of the key focuses on that lifestyle consumer. As you illustrated a minute ago, there's a number of new ways consumers are shopping. We have enormous amounts of data that we just didn't have a decade ago. And just a quick illustration here of one of the types of consumers we have there. They're interested in lifestyles, whether it's ketogenic, plant-based, dairy-free, and so forth, maybe for personal reasons or medical reasons. They're using tracking wearables to see their calories, see their sugar levels. They're doing all of this. And meanwhile, they're busier than ever. People are more busy at work, they're more busy at home, they're looking for convenience. And on top of all of that, they're environmentally conscious. They're looking to support brands that they trust, that they know the founders of, they believe in the mission of, they're expecting best-in-class customer service, and all of that wrapped in. So for a food and beverage founder, that presents obviously enormous challenges. You're taking a step from a traditional commodity product, obviously a simple food and beverage item, right the way through to a true brand experience, delivering on quality, product, and everything else that entails to really delight the consumer where they are. So that's the summary of Proper Good. I'll just quickly show you 2 slides and then we'll hopefully jump into a back and forth discussion. But at the prior brand I ran, we really found the food and beverage category can be extremely challenging for a number of ways. We wrote a big laundry list of things that are really challenging for young brands that are really resource stricken. And for us, that really came down to 6 areas, 3 across consumer and 3 across the operations of the business. From the consumer side, we're really seeing this center of food, technology, and wellness. Now, wellness means different things to different people, but it essentially focuses on clean label ingredients, knowing what's in the food, ingredients you can pronounce, and so forth. The food itself, there are certain cohort of the consumers that want to be chefs, but the majority of consumers are truly interested in convenience, providing for their family, and those different meal occasions through breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's what Proper Good is aiming to provide. Thirdly, that technology piece. Selling into grocery stores previously, it was a bit of a black box for a young brand. You sell it to a distributor, you sell it to a grocery store, and then it sort of enters the ether. With technology now, as you said, we can see all sorts of information, where you came from, how you're purchasing on a first order versus a reorder, what lifestyles you're interested in, what medical needs you have. And all of that comes around to a personalization effect where we can really have that one-to-one direct consumer relationship. We'll quickly touch on operations, and we'll get to this more later. But the other problem is food and beverage is traditionally very slow. The sales cycles are slow, the new product development cycles are slow. So we've really tried to flip that on its head. That comes down to everything from ultra rapid new product development, from idea to shipping in 6 weeks, low product production, so we can be testing and iterating before we scale, and all of that in a capital efficient environment. So I think we'll leave it there so we can jump into some questions, but that's the quick overview of Proper Good. Obviously 90-second meal solutions focused on quality and convenience.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, for that intro. So let's just get right into it. Maybe we can start off with the distribution channel changes that you referenced, right? When you think about direct to consumer, wholesale, grocery, where is this going in your opinion, and why?
Sure. So, let's just say COVID for a few seconds on that obviously has changed the game dramatically in 12 months. I mean, e-commerce has seen a multi-level year kind of leapfrog over where it was trending. We don't think there's any reason that will change. For most consumers surveyed, they're enjoying the convenience of direct to consumer. They're enjoying that frequent delivery and ability to be proactive on their choices through direct to consumer. At the same time, the reality is still 80% of purchases happen in a physical environment. So as a new and growing brand, you have to be cognizant of both of those. And for us, what we really think is the sweet spot is having the ability to launch on D2C, test, learn, grow. I mean, we have tens of thousands of happy customers that we can truly connect one-to-one with. That's just very different to a retail environment. If I launch into 400 stores across 20 states, unless you have enormous resources, it's very challenging to actually follow that journey. So what we're really seeing is direct to consumer, to build relationships, to test product, to grow sales and relationships, and then taking proven successful things into grocery being a nice path. Now, grocery stores we think will change over the coming decades, but at the moment, launching D2C and growing a true profitable business D2C and then entering grocery is a much cleaner strategy than launching grocery initially.
Interesting. And so as you think about, in the future, getting into the grocery channel, right? How do you think the future, what's the future grocery store going to look like? How do you think that's going to evolve?
Yeah, the crystal ball, shall we say. So I would say really what we've seen it change obviously over a number of years. Let's say the technology at checkout obviously is changing with things like Amazon and just seamless experience from going into the store to going out of the store. The few challenges that really exist in grocery today are for consumers trying to find specific products for their needs. Let's say you're a plant-based consumer or you're a dairy-free consumer or a paleo consumer. If you go into your average run-of-the-mill grocery store today, it is virtually impossible to shop for a paleo diet, right? You would have to turn over every product and read every label. There's no aisles set for this. There's no categorization. But yet, these are not small subsets. There are quite literally tens of millions of Americans following these specific lifestyles. And that's how D2C obviously allowed you to flip that and do it much easier. So I would say grocery store will start to flip from commodity food products to specialization, lifestyle driven, make it easier for consumers to find what they're looking for. And meanwhile, we have the bigger discussion of, do grocery stores need to carry as many products as they have? Do they need to be as big as they are? We see that perimeter of the store with fresh vegetables, perishables, milks, eggs, etc. That makes a lot of sense for that high velocity perimeter of the store. But the center store category is often a bit of a dead space. Do the grocery stores need to carry tens of thousands of SKUs across things like coffee, pasta, cereals, things like that can actually be very cost efficient to deliver via D2C. So there's a certain school of thought, and I think I'm in this school, that grocery stores will actually shrink in size. They'll become more focused on perishables as well as convenience. So with items like proper good, it's a grab and go lunch. It's a 90-second meal solution. In the same way a beverage is, or a snack bar, that is ultra convenient for consumer. But do you need to go to the grocery store to buy a 3-month supply of pasta? Debatable.
You talked about during your opening remarks about, test, iterate, and scale, right? And this whole learning process. Can you just bring that to life a little bit with an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so if for anyone not too familiar, the grocery store buying can be very, very slow in a traditional sense. I consulted for a number of big CPGs previously, and for planning for, say, Christmas 2021, we'd be doing this 18 months ago. So in terms of that just true scale of develop a campaign, a product, sell it to stores, manufacture it, ship it, can be an enormous timeline. Meanwhile, we've seen how quickly the world can change in 12 months, that you have no ability to flip on that dime, no ability to be nimble and really meet, again, where the consumer is actually going. You get outdated before you've even launched the product. So that's a bit of a chicken and egg though, right? It's hard to produce products quickly and nimbly. It's easy to produce a product at scale once you know it works. So for us at Proper Good, the key is nimble short stage production. So for example, let's say today we survey or we do a lot of consumer behavior analysis and we find a new product idea. In about 6 weeks, we'll have that launched, just a few thousand units to current consumers. That's out into the world. That's not, focus groups that take a lot of time, a lot of resources. This is nimble real-time testing. From that, we iterate, then we scale. So really you're taking down potentially an 18 months cycle down to 10 weeks. And that ability, I think, is a massive need in the food world, because consumers are changing every month. We have consumers that will be ketogenic for the new year, then they'll be on a fasting diet for the summer, then they'll be different in Q4 than they were in Q3. And having that insight, having that insight and ability to move with them is tremendous. And you can't do that if you have a 1-year product development cycle. So bringing that down is, I think, crucial for the future of food.
And can you just talk a little bit more about your kind of new product development process?
Yep.
What goes into it? What exactly are you doing to kind of understand what you should be doing? Any examples you can provide? Yeah,
definitely. I'll tell you, I'll give you one. I might share the screen quickly and give you one example of a product launch that we did exactly that. It was a short term to launch and then quick iteration. So hopefully you can see the screen. So this was when we launched. We've only been around about 11 months, but in that, we've scaled to tens of thousands of happy consumers. But there's obviously been bumps along the road, and this is one of those bumps that I think illustrates what you're talking about. So here we do all of our sales direct to consumer by eatpropergood.com. But what we noticed was, as you can see in graph 2, this is items ordered on first versus second order. We saw 3 of our 4 items, everyone's happy. The chicken mushroom soup, no one was ordering on a second order. Massive plummet. We had no idea why. We thought it was a good item. We obviously tested it. But the good news is we only launched a few thousand of them. This isn't, we don't have a warehouse full of this product that we're now concerned about. The good news is very easy with data online and D2C. We can quite literally see this in real time. The system alerts us. We survey everyone who ordered that soup once but didn't order it again. We then suddenly find out that thyme, this is news to me, the herb thyme is quite polarizing. Very bitter. Some people love it. I like it. I don't notice that flavor. If you don't like it, you really don't like it. But to discover this in a retail environment, this could have taken us 6 to 12 months. We wouldn't understand that sell-through and reorder on a consumer level. But this took us 2 weeks. We then iterate back in that test environment. We launch a new recipe. And crucially, point 8 here is actually one of my favorite points, because that ability to talk to consumers, we literally emailed everyone who ordered it once and not again with, hey, we messed up. We're sorry. We noticed you didn't enjoy this product. We've relaunched it. And quite literally, within 8 weeks, we've completely reiterated that recipe. We've relaunched it. And even we were, frankly, surprised at the hundreds of people that reached out with, thank you for the honest email. I gave it another go. It truly is much better. Thank you. Now, that is just a totally different way of launching and iterating a product than we were even in the world of dreaming in a traditional retail environment. So again, back to this just ability of nimble production.
That's fascinating. Certainly, hard to do if you have a lot of fixed cost infrastructure, and to your point, warehouses full of a certain type of product that doesn't work. So, one thing I want to address, given that I spend a lot of time looking at very large CPG companies, is customers expect more than just the product itself when they're dealing with these companies. They want eco-friendly, they want an engaging and mission-driven organization. How do some of the large CPG companies bridge that gap, from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because again, that challenge of if you're a large CPG company, maybe you don't have the pack format that makes sense for D2C if it's too heavy or so forth. And how do you build that awareness in a store environment? Because at the end of the day, your pack is your advertising in a store environment. And a pack is a limited small space, incredibly hard to communicate a lot of information. And people are really, they have that anchoring bias, right? If you've known a big corporate to be in your mind this way for 20 years, and they launch a new initiative, it's very hard for you to take that cognitive switch. I think you have such a bias and historical view of a large CPG. What we found in our discussions with obviously partners and interesting conversations is that launching that whole new subset line, we've seen companies that maybe have, a glass packaging line that's organic, that is focused on a mission need. Maybe it's a donation to a charity, a buy one, give one, something that's really the proof in the pudding. Because consumers, are quick to see through words. Words are cheap and obviously actions are not. And I think that ability to actually do a true campaign, show the results and communicate that in a way that is not a corporation. Consumers don't want a relationship with a corporation. They want a relationship with something they believe in. And that's a very challenging switch to make. As you said, if you're tooled for big, high scale production of consumer products in mass grocery, that's a very challenging hurdle to jump. But I think that subsetting out and testing and communicating with new product lines and new packaging with a focus on what consumers want is really the best way to get started.
Yeah, and look, I think most companies that I interact with, right, they get the mass personalization, and that's kind of what is most consumer relevant these days. But how does one achieve that, right? I mean, I think the execution of it is the problem.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Yeah, the personalization one's, so crucial with the way it's going now, which, as you said, we have everything from gut biome data to lifestyle to location and everything else that if consumers are willing to share that, we can really create a better experience for them. And I think personalization is on two sides. We've seen some great things in the protein space and the daily vitamin gummy space where it truly is personalized one-to-one production, similar to the sushi example you gave, based on all of that data. The flip of that, though, is mass personalization without one-to-one production. And that can be equally as valuable for consumers that we've found. We have people reach out that say, I'm a celiac and I don't eat pork. How can I serve that for you? Well, I can easily do that for you through an onboarding survey. I could quite simply have things from lifestyles to allergy to, do you change lifestyles over time, etc. And really, with just half a dozen pieces of upfront information, we can guide you through a personalization experience that lands you exactly where you want to be. Now, we haven't made product one for one for you, but we've cut the clutter. You've gone through the mass. And I think that's honestly back to that whole grocery store discussion of how does a consumer do that in store? Very challenging. It's the same analogy as a personal shopper in the clothing space. Obviously, if you go in and someone shows you around the store the items you may like, they're not manufacturing that item for you, but they're whittling it down from 10,000 items in the store to the one that you want based on your goals, your personal beliefs, etc. And we can do the same thing for that in food based on everything from I'm diabetic, or I want to eat plant-based, or as you said, gut biome, teeth bacteria. In theory, you can do all of that relatively easily with technology in an online environment. Now, taking that to the grocery store is another challenge, but in terms of the future of food, I think personalization will only increase tenfold as we progress.
That's fascinating. You talk a lot about data and consumer behavior. Can you just talk about proper goods model, the process there, and how you collect that data? How engaged are your customers in responding to giving you this information? I just be really curious about that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So the quick story there is why it's so important to us is, again, at the previous companies we've ran, is that once it enters that traditional retail distribution, as a brand, you don't have a lot of data, right? You just don't. You obviously have sales and potentially turns per week and things like that. But in terms of consumer level data, you just don't have that. So at Proper Good, one of the key tenets was from day one, we want to have as much data as the consumer is willing to share, but truly we want to make that actionable. Data is only as good as what you can actually do with it. So for us, what we do is literally everything from where you came from, the type of ad, let's say you clicked on a ketogenic ad, but then if you came to a store, maybe you bought ketogenic items, and then you mixed in a plant-based item. That's interesting, and that's helpful in a way that may be different if you'd solely focused on one lifestyle. Then from that, we can see, are you a subscription customer, a regular customer? What's your cadence of buying? Can we hit you with a text message to check how you're doing? Can we do that through email and phone call? I mean, honestly, phone call customer service being fantastically insightful. So all of those different data pieces come together to build a true consumer profile. So we can understand things like short-term lifetime value versus long-term lifetime value for a ketogenic customer or a gluten-free customer. And those vary all the time. And that level of data just really helps us understand where we should be going. And from that, just I know you mentioned the surveying of consumers, we send out continuous surveys from people who are enjoying the product to what they would like, what we can do, what they don't love, right down to people who churned. Let's find out why they churned. Is it a price consideration? Is it a chicken mushroom, again, example, with they just didn't enjoy the flavor? But that level, we can automate that all through technology. So we literally communicate with tens of thousands of people a month with a tiny in-house team. Crucially, all of that data comes through to quite literally the graphs I showed you a minute ago. So we're not sifting through a million lines of data. It's bing, the red flag goes off. Here's a problem with this product, or your customer acquisition cost for a plant-based consumer is much higher than it is for a ketogenic consumer, or something like that. And that level of data just makes the company so much more efficient and is, again, frankly, night and day to the way it's usually done in our experience.
Chris, are you satisfied with kind of the response rate you get? I mean, is it enough for you to make all these choices and decisions, or do you have to kind of go a couple of times to the same population?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought, in that it's actually, we're incredibly satisfied with the response rate. And I think that comes down to this overall, where is the consumer going? And say they want trusted brands, they want brands they can communicate with, they want that casual tone of voice, that friendliness, right? Again, it's not a commodity product, it's an experience, and we can help you through that experience. So, I mean, we have, survey response rates in the 10 to 20%, which is far higher than obviously you'd expect normally, because consumers love to share their thoughts. We get hundreds of emails a month of long form responses. This isn't click 4 stars, yes, no. It's they love to tell you what they liked, what they didn't. They shared it with a friend. And that comes down to you are solving a problem for them. If you're within those lifestyle diets and you're looking for quick and easy meals, it's actually really challenging to find those. So once consumers solve that problem, there's a built-in viral coefficient, right? If you're in the ketogenic community and you find a great ketogenic product, you're very happy to share it on social media. Usually you're very happy to, sign up to a subscription, share it with friends. And that just creates that much higher response rate, which is honestly fascinating and incredibly valuable for us as we learn.
That's excellent. Really, just really makes you think. Stretches your mind in terms of what things could look like 5 years from now, which is kind of the whole point of this entire session. Let me transition over to some of the audience Q&A, if you have some time, Chris. The first question is, which I think is a great question. Every food brand is great tasting, according to, the people making it. How do you really know your product is superior from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. So just to give you that example of from our previous experience, we would do the more traditional sense, right? We develop a benchtop recipe, we maybe test it at focus groups or farmers markets or things like that, but it really is somewhat biased, right? You're somewhat grouped into the people that are responding to the survey or the people that will come to the focus group. So there's an inherent bias before you've even started. But from that small set of data, we'll then produce 100,000 units and fill a warehouse and try and sell it to grocery. Now that is obviously a very long process and quite a lot of risk built into that. It's obviously not capital efficient, it's not time efficient, but you've taken a small sample size and said this is a good product and now scaled it up. Whereas we try to do the exact opposite. Honestly, if we don't have some products that fail or at least not need iterating on, we're not moving quick enough. So that chicken and mushroom example is a perfect one. But for us now, we'll go from consumer feedback, we'll do a benchtop recipe, we'll produce just 1,000, maybe 3,000 units. We'll get it all to current consumers, and then we'll bring in that feedback. Now, because that funnel of feedback comes through, you will very quickly see everyone loves it, or everyone wishes it had more cream, or everyone wishes had more cheese, or something like that. And it's very easy to get that mass feedback, and it's so much more valuable than those small sort of focus groups. It's really behavioral insight of, did they buy it, did they not rebuy it, did they respond, etc., as opposed to trying to take a small sample and scale from that. So really, we will go there, and we will not scale a production to 10 to 50,000 units or something like that until we've truly seen on a small sample set of 3,000 to 5,000 units, we've truly got all of the kinks out. And by all, we mean 9 out of 10. Obviously, there's some consumers that are just not going to like the product for whatever reason. But as soon as we hit that 90+% satisfaction on a product with no change in sugar, sodium, etc., then we scale. And that's just so much less risky for us. I mean, if the product is, frankly, let's just say it was awful, it doesn't really matter. It's taken us a few weeks, not cost us a lot of money, and yet we can either iterate or we can cut the product and move on to the next one. And that is obviously just a totally different capital efficient way of doing it than that other way.
I'll just kind of add on to that. P&G, which is a company that I follow, have for almost 2 decades, several years ago actually changed their innovation model to, instead of just lab testing, actually marketplace testing. Yep. And so, a company that's almost 200 years old just figured it out, 5-6 years ago. So, and it's really worked for them, right? It's really provided them, I think, much better innovation efficacy. So, I think that's kind of the way forward from here. Let me just ask. I mean, we have a lot of questions here, but let me just ask you on sustainability, right? Obviously, you're in a plastic pouch. I mean, just any thoughts around kind of how you're thinking about it, how you're thinking about the ingredients that you source. How should we think about that from a proper good standpoint?
Yeah, no, fascinating question. Obviously, we've done a lot of work on this because, as you said, we are in a plastic pouch. It is a BPA-free pouch. It is obviously safe from a food safety point of view, but nonetheless, it is a plastic pouch. So just to give you some thoughts around that, when we launched, we actually included a prepaid return envelope in every package we sent for you to return the pouches to us, and we would recycle them. Because they are recyclable, they're just not curbside recyclable. So we made it as easy as possible for you as a consumer to use the pouch, put it in a prepaid envelope, stick it in your mailbox, job done. The challenge is, even with that ease, not many consumers were doing it just on a weekly basis. I think it's just getting into that habit of truly recycling products that you buy on a daily basis. I think the reality is most of us just don't do that, unfortunately. So we flipped our thinking more from recycling the pouches. We still offer that program, but more to how can we sustainably ship to consumers as best as possible. So we've actually been surprised at the hundreds of people who have reached out that enjoy the size of the packaging. So because we're flexible and lightweight, we can compress 12 meals into a box literally this big, right? So that arrives on your doorstep. There's no overbox, there's no dry ice, there's no insulation. It's tiny, tiny. And people will often reach out daily to us with, love that this arrived in such timely fashion, in such a small packaging, with no excess. There's nothing else in there. It's almost perfect cubic efficiency from the food point of view. That to us has been really exciting, that consumers are truly seeing that where we're trying to do that, they actually care about that. So while recycling is maybe a step too far for most consumers, they are certainly aware and observe the efficiency in a delivery. Now, I'm sure we've all had, frozen food deliveries and so forth, which is the opposite end of that spectrum in terms of packaging waste and so forth. So we're really leaning into that. Second to that, we are working on a biodegradable pouch. That for us would be the holy grail in terms of that, obviously dead easy. The reality is the pouch is a very clever technology. It's 7 layers of different materials. It's just not possible to do that in a biodegradable format right now. But within the next 18 months, that's where we're hoping to go. And at that point, we'll hit all of our environmental goals.
Excellent. And, another question that came in is, can you envision ever leveraging your deep individualized consumer understanding to expand beyond the current product set to deliver a wider range of products or even services?
Certainly, services one's a really interesting one in that on the product though initially, yeah. So we launched, only 11 months ago, focused on the soups and broths category. that has quickly expanded through all of our surveying and inbound feedback of, why can't we make 90-second meal solutions for lunch, dinner, and breakfast? You could do everything from oatmeal to risotto to all sorts of things. And we survey people on all of this. Why can't we do that as opposed to just soups and broth, which frankly has been the aim of the company from day one. We launched Market with soups. The real plan for the company is that true meals platform online, mix and matching, lunch, breakfast, and dinner occasions, and also using products, mix and matching between them. So for example, our red pepper soup, you can eat it as a soup, as a lunch, it's filling, it's delicious, keto friendly, etc. You can also pour that over pasta, put it in the oven, and you've got a pasta bake. Or you can mix and match it with a rice pouch, and then you have a much larger meal. So using our items either individually, as an ingredient, or together, really creates that consumer convenience where they can mix and match. It's fun, it's subscription led. You can mix and match new items each month, all done via text message, etc. So then you create that true experience of wider occasions and usefulness, frankly, to people, as opposed to just an item. And I think that's the key difference. And quickly on the services, though, just to touch on that, without a doubt, we get a lot of people reaching out for advice on, I'm 65, my doctor said I need to be reducing sugar intake. Will these items be applicable for me? That type of thing, if we can turn that into a true experience where we can be seen as an expert in the space on living healthy, biome, sodium intake, etc., then you can start to really help people guide a healthy lifestyle and supplement that with items. Then you start to create a really cool ecosystem, which I think is particularly interesting.
Fascinating. How do you create awareness for your brand? I mean, do you use influencers? Is it all organic? Is it word of mouth? I mean, any thoughts around that?
Sure, it's a real mixture, I would say. So we obviously do the traditional sort of paid media advertising, direct response ads, Facebook, Google, Reddit, etc. But what's really interesting for us, because we are shelf stable and lightweight, we can actually sample mass direct to consumer very cost effectively. Obviously, that's very challenging to do if you're maybe a heavy beverage or a frozen food brand. So what we do is quite literally send hundreds or thousands of samples a month to individuals that we found through social media. And what's nice about our lifestyle solutions, as we said right at the beginning of the call, we're solving a pain point for them. If you're a plant-based consumer trying to find a 90-second meal solution, it's incredibly difficult. So we find them on Instagram. These people are very vocal about their lifestyles and their needs. We sample to them, and they're usually more than happy to post. Obviously, there's no obligation to post, but they're more than happy to post about it for free. And that gets that cycle going. So if you check, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of user-generated content pieces, all just through, honestly, quite simple sampling of, hey, we notice you follow this lifestyle, or you're in this career. Maybe you're a nurse or a lawyer and you need quick meals. If you have a crazy schedule, would you like to try one? Yes. Simple as that, and that gets that flywheel going. So we really lean into that, and we don't call it influencers, and a lot of these people don't honestly call themselves influencers. They're just everyday people that they need a meal solution, and we provide that, and they're happy to tell people about it because we solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think given the ubiquity of social media, the way to build brands today is not by just blasting a message. It's really people recommending. It's the recommendation element. From neighbor to neighbor or friend to friend or family member to family member. So I think that also is the way forward. And then, from a subscription standpoint, is that something that's part of your business model? How is that going? If it is, any thoughts around this business being set up like a subscription, like you would in the personal care space or even in the pet space?
Yeah, no, it's one of the evolutions we found. So for the first few months of the business, didn't even have a subscription option. When we turned that on, it's one of the biggest needle movers that we had. We found that people really want this subscription. The key to it, though, is proactive, and they're not locked in for 12 months. They're not going to be tricked and have their credit card charged and then more product arrive. If you can have that proactive subscription where we'll tell you 3 days before we're about to renew, would you like to swap an item, or respond yes to add our new flavor to your upcoming delivery. Things like that make it seamless, and you're not tricking a consumer. They're in a subscription, but they don't feel trapped because it is such proactive communication. So we're really seeing that. So we're not a subscription business. We offer a la carte shopping as well as you would usually. but we're really seeing subscription grow on a monthly basis as a core piece of the business. And for us, honestly, that helps in every way, right? It helps the consumer keep it front of mind. It helps us from a cadence point of view. And consumers love the idea of having, exclusive VIP perks for being a subscriber. They get early release products, so on and so forth. So the short answer to that is yes, subscription is a key focus for the company. And then obviously that will evolve over time. And again, is something that we can't do in traditional retail, but that's really focused for the D2C side of the business.
Interesting. Just a question about, the meal, right? You're selling a meal, but, this product being part of the meal, which we're starting to see more and more within this category, right? Where, soup is not just the end product, but it's part of the end product, right? And we saw this happen during COVID quite a bit. And I know Campbell's is seeing this similar dynamic. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, in terms of using the product in meals and recipes and so forth. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So I haven't got the number in front of me, but it's a significant portion of consumers will use soup in this example as an ingredient within a meal, right? So our primary use case is a quick lunch or a quick meal. You're popping home from work, or you're at work, or you're coming home from the gym, tear the top off, stick it in the microwave. In 90 seconds, you've got a nutritional meal that fits your lifestyle. That's our primary use case. The second use case is exactly as you described. I have a family of 4. I want to make a nice, easy meal for dinner. So they will often take 1 or 2 of our pouches, as I said, use it, put it with rice or a protein or, some sauteed vegetables or something like that. And very quickly, within, quite literally a few minutes, you have a key source as a base to a recipe. It's got no added sugar. It's got the ingredients you want. It's the nutritional profile you want. You haven't had to make it from scratch. And because it's shelf stable, you can store them up in the pantry. So we have consumers there were 10 of this red pepper, they'll use 3 or 4 of them for lunches and the rest of them for a pasta bake or pouring over noodles or cooking chicken to put in it or whatever it's going to be. So that ease of convenience, if it's not from a meal point of view, it's certainly from an ingredient point of view. And there's just as much opportunity for using the products as premium ingredient solutions as they are as meal solutions, for sure.
And just given, the 90-second meal in a microwave, I mean, does that mean that the microwave is kind of the primary cooking tool of the future, or do you see it evolving into another area?
Sure, it's a really interesting one. Back actually before we launched the company, that was one of the key questions we sought to solve. Like, do consumers use the microwave? Do they want to use the microwave? How is it perceived from a health point of view? And we were pleasantly surprised that at least our summary is yes. Microwave is certainly coming back. If there's a lot of data behind that, there's a lot of great articles published around consumers seeing the convenience of microwaves. They're as safe as they could possibly be. The science is all there. They've been used for a long time now. And the convenience is paramount, right? I mean, every workplace in the country has a coffee pot and a microwave in the break room. That type of example, which we're seeing usage occasions for. As I said earlier, nurses, there's 4 million nurses in the US, crazy schedules. They absolutely love proper good. As a 90-second meal, they can pop in the backpack, put in the microwave at work, job done. So we don't see the microwave going anywhere at all. We actually think it will increase for that convenience reason, especially as COVID starts to subside and people get back to recreation. They become more busy than ever, more focused on convenience. We see the microwave continuing to rise. So yes is our answer to that.
And I mean, this is more curiosity because I've been spending a lot of time thinking about 2025. We've written a lot of research around that topic. 3D printing, right? The Sushi Singularity restaurant concept is all 3D printed, right? I mean, basically every meal is created that way. Have you thought about how that would fit in at some point in the future, like how food and 3D printing could come together?
Sure. No, I've read with you. It's fascinating. I've read every article and blog that exists on it. I haven't seen the proof of concept at scale yet, but I mean, it follows that trend as we talk about true future of food. Not this year, not next year. In the next 10 years, if we look, overall trends are certainly around personalization and convenience. Now, 3D printed food, as long as you can get the quality and all of that, let's just assume that goes well. I mean, 100%, why would that not make sense? If the speed and cost and quality is there, having true personalization, imagine if you could go on and you can literally order for your exact needs, either medical or personal choice wise. and it delivers 2 days later and it's been 3D printed for you, that's incredible. I haven't seen it work at cost and scale yet, but yeah, yes is the answer in terms of, is it going to go that way, assuming the technology's there.
Yeah, it's just wild to think about.
Totally.
So a couple last questions here, Chris, before we come up on time. What are, in your view, are some of the biggest challenges in terms of scaling the business, right? I mean, this is such a small batch operation. How do you think about the scaling?
Yeah, honestly, that's a great thought in that it comes back to this, test and iterate is great, but test and iterate only gets you to a certain phase. You now need to be able to scale, right? You know what? You can't build a business producing a few thousand units at a time. So really that is that chicken and egg of nimbleness versus scale. And in previous food brands and food brands we've helped, you tend to land on one or the other, right? You're that young, kind of scrappy, cool company that's doing a handmade product or a small production product, or you're a big CPG. Now the challenge is every small company wants to be a big company and every big company wants to act like a small company, as we know. So what we've done at Proper Good is truly intentionally try to blend that from day one. And that's certainly not easy. For us, though, we frankly build a supply chain where we can go from 2,000-3,000 units tomorrow if we want, to 100,000-200,000 units next week as we need to. So it really comes down to just the care we built in the supply chain. But for others listening, and obviously new food brands that are emerging, solving that problem, that could be a different manufacturing supplier, it could be a different product line. There are plenty of companies now that have D2C suitable products that are lightweight, shelf stable, and they also have grocery store products that are maybe in glass packaging or a different thing that is efficient to ship palletized, but is not efficient to ship D2C. So maybe if your product line is not test, iterate, scale in its current format, are there sublines that can exist? Ones that are purpose built for D2C, to meet consumers where they are, educate them, discover them, get that feedback loop. Meanwhile, your separate product line in different packaging format is built for grocery. So you may not be able to do that test, iterate, scale with one product line. It may just be a function of the business. But one way or another, my argument would be you need to find a way to build that into the business somehow. And that is most likely through different pack formats and packaging.
And then how do you keep your costs down, when you're running, small runs, right? Do you need scale to lower your costs? I mean, how does that work within your franchise?
Yeah, it's actually one of the fallacies we found, at least in the food industry in our experience, is that there's certainly margin to be created at scale. Obviously, there's economies of scale there. There is also certainly diseconomies of scale, though. At a certain point in food, you will hit a plateau relatively quickly. For example, for us to produce 50,000 units of an item, the margin is not particularly different if we were producing 250,000 of that item. You hit a plateau relatively quickly within certain elements of the supply chain, obviously ingredients and packaging being the primary ones. So for us, really, you need a margin even at early stage, because the reality is to get into grocery stores is expensive, grocery distribution, brokers, etc. And acquiring consumers online is expensive. So you need that inherent margin from day one, or a significant funding source if you don't have that, even at day one. And for us, that is, we're happy to take a lower margin initially, but it can't be so low with this hope of at scale, it will turn that point into profitability. That, I believe, is a bit of a risky game, because I do think you run into just as many diseconomies as you do economies.
Excellent. Well, we're coming down to the closing minutes here. Just a takeaway from this conversation is the simplicity of bringing the consumer into your process, right? And you think about the consumer goods industry or services industry, it's all about staying consumer relevant. And I think a lot of the large CPG companies started off that way, and then over time they spent less time focusing on their consumer and more time on stakeholders, right? And I see that every day as a stock analyst, where a lot of stakeholders are big institutional investors, and you have to appease them, and sometimes it takes away from the consumer. So I just thought that was, to me, the biggest takeaway from this fascinating discussion. Chris, any closing thoughts from your end before I wrap up?
No, I think that's a solid takeaway, and it sounds so simple, doesn't it? I mean, involving the consumer in the product you're making for them. It sounds so obvious, but doing that at scale on a mass one-to-one way, enabled by technology, is actually pretty challenging. And obviously, but as things progress, I think that's the way to go. And it's of benefit for everyone, frankly. It's a benefit for us as a company, and it's a benefit for the consumer. So it really is a win-win if you can find the way to do it.
Excellent. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, XRC Labs, for the partnership on this and allowing me to be a part of it. Again, Chris, thank you for your insight and your time. And for everyone that's joined us today, thank you. We hope this discussion has opened up a few possibilities in the way you might think about the future of food. Until next time, everyone stay safe and healthy. Luckily, the weather is starting to turn, so hopefully everyone can start getting outside. Be well. Thank you.